afternoon, I'm going to be interviewing Kim Alexander. So for those of you that are joining us today, for the month of February for Black History Month, I interviewed 4 Black women entrepreneurs on entrepreneurship and success tips. And we got an amazing response from you guys. So we're continuing for the month of March. So I'm really excited about today. I'm going to go ahead and add Kim Alexander to the session. All right, you guys. So just say hello and let us know where you're viewing from as Kim gets on the session. Hi, Kim. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Nice to meet you virtually.
Nice to meet you too. All right. This is good.
Yes. Okay. Well, I was just giving a little introduction so people who are getting logged on so they know that I am interviewing you today for the Black Women Business Series. And you guys, today we are going to be talking about the power of communication. Kim is an excellent communicator, so she's going to be sharing a lot of tips, a lot of practical things that you can begin implementing in your life to be an effective communicator. So before we jump into that, Kim, can you just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
So thank you for having me first and foremost. I'm really, really excited about today. So my name is Kimberly Alexander. I host a talk radio show down here in Dallas called The Game on 105.3 The Fan. The Game stands for Golf and More Experience. And I'm more of the and more experience part because I was married to an NFL player and I'm also a baseball mom. The other part of my life is a little bit more complicated, a little bit more difficult, and definitely a little bit more emotional. But I lost my husband to a blood cancer about 8 years ago called multiple myeloma. And so kind of a combination of all of these experiences have brought me to where I am today. And it actually serves as a lot of inspiration for all of the things that I do, because in addition to hosting the sports talk radio show, I do a lot of speaking engagements, raising awareness about multiple myeloma, which is the blood cancer my husband had, and just trying to be an inspiration and resource for cancer patients and caregivers. And so I do a lot in that space. And I also have a company called Kim Connects, and I believe in connecting people and just kind of making things happen and just doing my thing down here in Dallas.
Yeah, definitely. And I checked you out, preparing for these interviews. I do a lot of internet stalking, just trying to get to know you. And I noticed, I listened to a few interviews of just your past and what you've gone through, and I just think it's amazing how you took such a tragic situation and you've been such a light and inspiration to so many people. Now, and I also noticed that, is it March, Multiple Myeloma Month?
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And so it's a really busy time of year for me because I've actually already done a couple of speaking engagements. But honestly, it's Multiple Myeloma Month for me every month because I'm always going to talk about it and raise awareness about it because it's incurable. It's the #1 blood cancer that affects African Americans. And a lot of us don't even know anything about it. Neither my husband nor myself had ever even heard of it before he was diagnosed with it. And it's interesting because even though he had myeloma, I actually didn't lose him to myeloma. I lost him to complications because of it, which actually has impacted the way I communicate to this day. My husband actually passed from an aneurysm. And so I was talking to him 1 minute and 20 minutes later, he was gone. And so I try to tell people all the time that because of that experience, I value time like in a completely different way than most people. And it really has impacted how I move forward today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we talk about the power of communication, and clearly your life experiences have brought you to being a powerful communicator, what would you say are some techniques that help you when it comes to being an effective communicator?
For me, I think being an effective communicator means being extremely authentic. That's one of the things that I've noticed the most when I'm talking to people, when I'm very honest with them about my experience, when I'm honest with them about, even what seems like an insignificant detail, it's incredible to me how it allows me to connect with people that I am and with people that I'm talking to. And so for me, that is really, really, really the most important part about being an effective communicator. It's just making sure you get your point across clearly, making sure you are true to who you say you are, so that people can really, really just get a sense of just being able to feel what it is you're trying to get out of them. You know what I mean?
And when it comes to communicating, I love listening to different communicators, from pastors, preachers, motivational speakers. One thing that I notice about effective communicators is that they speak from a place of passion. And typically when you have an effective communicator, they're speaking from a very strong why. And with your story and what I know from your story, you have a very strong why of wanting to increase awareness about this cancer. So I think that's absolutely amazing. Now, the next question I wanted to ask you was, have you always been an effective communicator? Has this always, would you consider communication a gift of yours, or was that something you had to cultivate over time?
You know what? Oddly enough, I feel like I have been to a certain extent. And I think it started back when I was a little kid. You know, I was that girl that I didn't play sports. I wasn't any good at them. I didn't like to sweat. I was a mess in high school. But I loved being on yearbook staff. I loved being involved with student government. So I think there's always been something that wanted me to be able to tell a story, whether it be with words, whether it be with images. And it ended up translating when I went to college and I decided to pursue broadcast journalism. And so I think it's always been in me. Because of my husband's job, you know, with him being in the NFL, I couldn't really work. It was a little bit difficult to go into a newsroom and be like, hey, hire me, even though I'm moving in 6 months when the season is over. So I never really did anything in my field when my husband was playing. And so being able to pull back on those experiences has allowed me to grow as an effective communicator now. You know, I'm able to speak to people without issue. I know a lot of people have a hard time standing up and talking in front of people, but I absolutely love it. I think it's really, really, really important to be able to effectively give the who, what, when, where, and why of anything that I'm ever trying to tell them.
So how do you prepare for your speaking engagements? Because public speaking is one of the number one fears of many people, but how do you prepare for a speaking engagement?
Well, it's interesting because I'm one of those people where I don't really like a canned speech. I love to wake up in the morning and whatever's on my heart that day, that's pretty much what's going to come out of my mouth. Luckily, I think I can ad-lib pretty well too, and so it tends to help. But one of the things I do like to do is take notes. I'll try to draw from experience, maybe something poignant that happened that makes me want to make sure that I relay that message to the audience. I also believe in making sure I understand who I'm talking to. I think that is critical. It doesn't make sense for me to have in my head what I want to say, only to find out the people in the audience can't even relate to what it is I'm trying to tell them.
Yeah.
Let me think of what else is really important. I think it's also just important to do your research on not only who is in the audience, but the people who are bringing you in, just to make sure that whatever it is you're saying, that it's in line with whatever they're trying to ultimately do for the audience as well. Quite often, I'm not being brought in by the audience. I'm being brought in by someone else who feels like what I have to say is important. And so I think it's important to make sure that you connect the dots in that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So who is one of the greatest communicators that you've ever experienced, and what stood out about them?
Oh, gosh, that is a good question, and that is a tough one. Gosh. All right, now you've stumped me. I'd have to think really hard on that because I've heard from so many. I think one of the best speeches I've ever heard actually came from Robin Roberts. I actually heard her speak here in Dallas a couple of years ago, and that experience, and it may have also been because it was a little bit personal. You know, she's had her own experience with cancer, and she had a stem cell transplant, which was a procedure that I was very familiar with. And when I tell you, it was like I could just hang off of every word that came out of her mouth. She was incredible. I have a lot of respect for Robin Roberts.
Wow, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, also, when it comes to communication, so I understand you have a background in broadcast journalism, and you started really your speaking career after the loss of your husband.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so when it comes to your mission and your purpose in Kim Connects, what are your communication ability with Kim Connects? Because you said that you love connecting people. How does that tie into being an effective communicator?
Well, the way I like to tie in communicating in that regard is I'm really particular about who I have in the room when I do my Kim Connects events. And the reason is because when I have invited people to, typically they've been dinner events, I want to make sure that there's a takeaway and that there's a powerful takeaway. I feel like there are a lot of events being held these days where it's just people kind of coming together and everybody's having a good time, which is great. But for me, and this goes back to my appreciation for time, you know, I want people to come to anything that I host and walk away with a relationship with someone that they can really, really learn from, really benefit from, and to also make sure that that learning and benefit is mutual. You know, I don't want it to be a situation where, you know, people are coming in and handing out business cards and someone's walking away almost feeling used. I want the experience to be where people can share their stories, people can share what they have in common, and take away knowing that they've come together and can benefit from knowing each other.
So what exactly is a Kim Connect event for people who have heard of that? So is it networking dinner?
So I've done a couple that way. That is actually my favorite way of doing it. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't had the opportunity to do one in a while because I got a little bit busy with my son, which is a whole nother story. But basically what it is it's a private dinner event. I come up with the entire playlist because I also feel like music is a huge part of a really good, powerful experience. And I make sure that the people who are in the room can benefit, like there's some kind of connection between them. So my very first one that I did was talking about personal style, and I had a speaker come in and talk about style. I had some people who were from different industries that I felt like needed to connect. It's like, I know this person, I know that person. You know what? I think the two of you would really benefit from knowing each other. And that was kind of how it all came about. They're a lot of fun. I just need to make sure that I get back on doing them because I've had a lot of people asking.
Absolutely. And so when it comes to your radio show, do you do interviews on your radio show as well, or?
Sometimes we do. For the most part, our show is only an hour long, so it's pretty quick, but it's a lot of sports, you know, and it's interesting because I'm not the typical sports girl. I don't want to talk about statistics and tackles and how many yards after the catch he had. I'm actually more interested in the backstory. I love knowing why players are doing certain things, why coaches are doing certain things. To me, that's the aspect of sports that's really not told as much. And of course, I'm a little bit sensitive to it with my husband having played football. And honestly, now with my son playing baseball, I'm still partial to making sure that I respect the athlete side. I feel like a lot of times these days, athletes get the raw end of the deal.
Yeah, awesome. So I love to, as I do these interviews, I love asking guests about their book recommendations. Do you have any book recommendations that you can share that have just been, that's helped you on this journey of being a great communicator, and really developing yourself as an entrepreneur and an author and a speaker?
Wow, there have been a few. And it's another thing I probably should have prepared for, but I will say this. I actually have a new book that I'm getting into right now. It's by Marshawn Evans called Believe Bigger. She's a dear, dear friend of mine, and I'm so appreciative of how, her support over the years helped me basically reinvent myself after my husband passed away, and it's allowed me to do so much. And her book is actually out on shelves today, so I definitely encourage people to go and check out Believe Bigger by Marshawn Evans Daniels.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. So as we wrap up this interview, if anyone watching has any questions for Kim, please go ahead and leave those in the comment box so we can get a few questions before we wrap up to see if you guys want to just get more information on anything that she's touched on. But the last question that I have for you, Kim, being that this is multiple myeloma month, what can people do to increase awareness about this or support those who are going through this?
Well, I would encourage people to check out a couple of websites. One is actually on Facebook. It's a Facebook group called Standing in the Gap, and I'm an ambassador for that program. And we raise awareness about multiple myeloma in the African American community. I'm also very involved with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. I do a lot of fundraising and raising awareness that way. And come directly to me. Feel free to contact me. I have a lot of resources that I would gladly share when it comes to talking to anyone about cancer in general or myeloma or any blood cancer, to be very honest with you. But then I also, I have a lot of information when it comes to sports. I'm really sensitive about the whole football thing and concussions. And I've got a son now that I kind of pushed away from football a little bit and pushed him to play baseball. So if anybody ever wants to talk about that as well, I'm definitely a resource for it. So feel free to contact me on Instagram at @TheKimAlexander, and I'm also there on Twitter and Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm pretty accessible.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I know I said that was my last question, but I have a follow-up question.
Okay, go ahead.
You mentioned your children. So being that you have 2 children, how do you balance it all? Doing Kim Connects, being a speaker, an author, you're raising support. How do you do it all?
Well, it's a lot easier now because my kids are older. They're 22 and 20. And my oldest one is in college, and he's an aspiring DJ. And my youngest one actually was drafted by the Yankees out of high school. So he is in Tampa in spring training doing his own thing. And so once I was able to get both of the boys through high school and off to adulthood a little bit, it allowed me a lot more time to focus on some things that I wanted to. And one of the things I really did want to focus on, of course, was raising awareness about myeloma, because when my husband was alive, he was a really, really strong cancer advocate. And I feel like I just needed to pick up where he left off and do my thing.
Absolutely. Awesome. So I'm going to take a question. Someone says from Soul.Girl, she says, Kim, what do you suggest to strengthen communication skills? Any TED Talks or books?
Ooh, you know what? One of the things that I would do is I'm a really big fan of listening to different podcasts and definitely, even oddly enough, some YouTube videos. It's incredible how much information you can get from people in those spaces. One of the things I have recently learned, and I have to own up to it, is that as great as I am about communicating to a certain extent, as much as I love doing it, as much as I love being able to help people do it, I also recognize when I'm not doing it in a good way for myself. And I recently hired someone who is on here. Valicia, I see you. I'm so appreciative of you listening, but I took it upon myself to reach out and ask for help. And I have no problems hiring a consultant because I know I don't know everything. And so I'm appreciative of her coming on board to help me get my message across, because it's easier sometimes to work on other people's projects than it is to even work on your own. So don't hesitate to ask for help.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Tiff said, was the journey of being an entrepreneur hard for you?
You know what? I don't really think it was necessarily hard because I felt like I didn't have much of a choice. It's been very interesting. A lot of self-learning, a lot of doing research, and just you have to learn how to be resourceful. And back in the day when my first company, oddly enough, was a t-shirt company. And that was around back in like maybe 2001, 2002, way before social media became a thing. I feel like these days there's so much information right at our fingertips that it really doesn't make sense for anyone to not be able to pursue whatever it is they really want to put their mind to. So the information's out there. You might have to dig a little bit deeper. You might have to find some ways where, if it's a financial situation where you can't necessarily pay for the help, you'd be surprised at how many libraries offer free courses, how many free courses you can find on Eventbrite, places like that. You just have to dig a little bit deeper, but there's always a will when there's a way.
Yes, awesome. All right, well, it looks like that was, okay, well, here's the last question that we got from a viewer, and this is from Lizbeth. She says, I'm a communication and broadcasting major, and I'm a junior. What are some tips you can give me to stay on the right path when it comes to broadcasting? I often doubt myself.
Ooh, I don't know if you're involved with NABJ yet, but let me tell you, if you are not, get involved with the National Association of Black Journalists. I was late to getting involved with NABJ, and I completely regret it. That was something that I should have done in college, because one of the things that I realized when I see people there, people who are attending, it is all about building relationships. And there are people there who have been going since they were in college, who are now helping each other when it comes to trying to find jobs. And it's incredible to watch the networking. And they even offer scholarships. So if you can't necessarily afford to pay the fees, look into applying for a scholarship through the National Association of Black Journalists.
Awesome. Great advice. All right. Well, yeah, it looks like, what are the best ways to advocate for causes we support like you do? That's a good question.
That's a great question. Let me tell you, that's a good one. I could probably go on all day about that. First and foremost, I would say look into your local area to find out if there are support groups or nonprofit organizations that focus on whatever it is that you are passionate about. Try to identify if there's some kind of need and connect with people who are already involved with it. There are a lot of people who are passionate about things, and the first thing they think is, oh, well, you know what, let me start a nonprofit. I don't necessarily agree with that at all. I feel like there are ways that we can lend our voices to already well-run, machines and get involved and turn that passion into something really significant in terms of helping other people.
I love that. Absolutely. It's not about always reinventing the wheel, but serving those who already are established. That's Absolutely. So yes. Well, Kim, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge. You are an amazing communicator. And once again, if people want to learn more about what you're doing, you mentioned your Instagram. Where else can they get in contact with you?
I have a website. It's kimconnects.com. And I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. Both of those handles are at the Kim Alexander. I'm also on LinkedIn under Kimberly Alexander. So look for me. I'm there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. I hope you have an amazing rest of the day.
All right. You too. Bye.